The year was 2347, and humanity had spread across 17 star systems. They were a quiet species, busy with their own affairs, building colonies and raising families on distant worlds. The rest of the galaxy barely noticed them. The elder races of the Galactic Concord had ruled the Milky Way for over 40,000 years, and to them, humans were just another young species crawling out of their home system. Nothing special, nothing worth attention. Admiral Grace Holloway stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Erebus, watching the stars through the main viewport. She was 53 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. She had spent her entire adult life in service to Earth's fleet, rising through the ranks during a time of peace that everyone knew could not last forever. The transmission arrived without warning. Her communications officer, a young man named Danny Webb, looked up from his console with confusion on his face. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority message. It's coming from the Galactic Concord." Grace felt something cold settle in her stomach. The Concord had never contacted humanity directly before. Not once in the 80 years since first contact. "Put it through," she said. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a creature that made Grace's skin crawl. It was a Vethrani, one of the elder races. They looked like insects grown to the size of men, with hard shells and compound eyes that reflected no warmth. This one wore ceremonial robes that marked it as someone important. "I am High Arbiter Zelthus of the Galactic Concord," the creature said. Its voice was translated by computer, but the arrogance came through perfectly. "The Concord has observed humanity's expansion with interest. The time has come for your species to take its proper place in galactic society. You are summoned to the Citadel of Voices to discuss integration protocols. You will send representatives within 30 standard days. This is not a request." The transmission ended. Grace stared at the empty space where the hologram had been. Commander Nathan Cole, her second in command, stepped up beside her. He was younger than her by a decade, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of calm, steady presence that made people trust him in a crisis. "Integration protocols," he said quietly. "That's what they called it when they absorbed the Torvani 3,000 years ago. And the Kellish. And the Mundari." Grace nodded. She knew the history. Every species that had been integrated into the Concord became servants in all but name. They paid tribute. They provided soldiers for Concord wars. They gave up colony worlds whenever the elder races decided they wanted them. They bowed, and they stayed bowed forever. 3 weeks later, Grace traveled to the Citadel of Voices aboard a diplomatic vessel. Ambassador Diane Marsh led the human delegation. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, known for her ability to remain calm when everyone around her was panicking. The Citadel was a space station orbiting a dead star. Inside, the meeting chamber was vast, large enough to hold thousands. Representatives of the 12 elder races sat in elevated positions, looking down at the human delegation like judges examining criminals. High Arbiter Zelthus spoke for the Concord. He explained, in patient tones that dripped with condescension, that younger species must earn their place in galactic civilization. Humanity's rapid expansion had been noted. They were growing too fast, spreading too far. It was time for them to accept guidance. "You will submit to integration protocols," Zelthus said. "In exchange, the Concord will provide you with advanced technology, medical treatments that will extend your lifespans, weapons to defend your worlds. All we ask in return is tribute, military service when required, and the surrender of 3 of your colony worlds that have been deemed strategically necessary." Diane Marsh kept her expression neutral. "And if we decline this generous offer?" Zelthus's compound eyes seemed to glitter. "No species has ever declined. It would be unwise to be the first. But if we did?" The chamber fell silent. Other delegates shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke to the elder races this way. Zelthus leaned forward. "Then you would stand alone. The galaxy is a dangerous place for those without friends. Younger species that refuse integration often find themselves facing difficulties. Pirates, resource shortages, accidents. He let the word hang in the air. In the end, they always learn their place. Grace stood at the back of the human delegation, watching and listening. She saw the threat for what it was. Submit or be destroyed. Not immediately, perhaps. Not openly, but slowly, inevitably, humanity would be ground down until they had no choice left. The delegation returned to Earth with the Concord's demands. The United Earth Council met in emergency session. The debate lasted for days. Some council members argued for acceptance. The Concord's technology could advance humanity by centuries. Why fight a battle they could not win? Others wanted to negotiate, to buy time, to find a middle path. A few suggested fleeing, abandoning known space, and starting over somewhere the Concorde could not find them. Defense Secretary Paul Jennings waited until everyone else had spoken. Then he stood and activated a classified holographic display. The room fell silent as images appeared, images that most of the council had never seen before. Ships, dozens of ships, hundreds of them. Black-hulled vessels unlike anything in Earth's official fleet. They floated in the darkness of deep space, hidden in shipyards built into asteroids in the Oort cloud. Far from prying eyes. 30 years ago, Paul said, the previous council looked at the galaxy and saw the truth. The Concorde would come for us eventually. They always do. So we started preparing. Quietly. Secretly. We built a fleet designed not for exploration or defense, but for war against enemies with superior technology. We called it Project Obsidian. He zoomed in on the largest ship, a massive vessel bristling with weapons that the Concorde had never seen. Ladies and gentlemen, I present the Black Armada. 47 warships, crewed by volunteers who know exactly what they signed up for. They've been training for this moment their entire careers. The council stared at the display in stunned silence. We have a choice, Paul continued. We can bow to the Concorde and spend the rest of eternity as their servants. Or we can show them that humanity will not kneel. Admiral Grace Holloway watched the faces around the table. She saw fear there. Yes, but she also saw something else. Pride. Defiance. The stubborn refusal to surrender that had carried humanity through every crisis in its history. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Earth would not bow. The message was sent to the Citadel of Voices 3 days later. It was short and simple. The people of Earth thank the Concorde for their offer. We respectfully decline. We will determine our own future. In the darkness of deep space, the Black Armada began to move. The crew members checked their weapons, ran final diagnostics, and prepared themselves for what was coming. They knew the odds. They knew that they might not survive what came next, but they also knew why they were fighting. Not for conquest, not for glory, for the simple right to exist on their own terms, to look up at the stars and know that they belong to no one but themselves. Grace Holloway stood on the bridge of the Erebus and looked out at the fleet assembled around her. 47 ships against an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 40,000 years. It was madness. It was suicide. It was the most human thing she had ever seen. All ships, she said into the fleet-wide channel. Begin deployment. It's time to show the galaxy what we're made of. The Galactic Concorde gave humanity 60 standard days to change their minds. They expected the humans to panic, to argue among themselves, to eventually come crawling back with apologies and acceptance. That was how it always worked. Younger species made brave noises at first, but reality always crushed their spirit in the end. On day 43, a Vethrani enforcement flotilla arrived at the human colony world of New Helsinki. 12 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and took positions in orbit, their weapons pointed at the cities below. It was standard procedure, the same intimidation tactic the Concorde had used 100 times against 100 species. Show overwhelming force. Make the primitives understand their helplessness. Wait for surrender. Fleetmaster Korath commanded the flotilla from his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. He was old for a Vethrani, his shells scarred from decades of service. He had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds and had never once faced a serious challenge. This mission bored him. Humans were soft creatures, fragile and short-lived. They would break easily. Governor Linda Price stood in her office in New Helsinki's capital city, watching the alien ships through her window. Her aide, a nervous young man named Kevin Park, urged her to evacuate. The Planetary Defense Force was tiny, just a handful of patrol ships meant to deal with pirates. They had no chance against Concord warships. Linda shook her head. "We're not leaving our home." She recorded a message and sent it to Earth. "This is Governor Linda Price of New Helsinki. The Concord has arrived. 12 ships. They're demanding we surrender the colony. I'm refusing. Whatever happens next, tell the Council we didn't run." Admiral Grace Holloway received the message aboard the Erebus. She had been waiting for this moment, dreading it, and preparing for it in equal measure. The Black Armada was already in position, hidden in deep space just 2 hours away at maximum speed. She contacted Defense Secretary Paul Jennings on a secure channel. "It's happening. New Helsinki, 12 enemy ships." Paul's face was grim on the display. "You have authorization, Admiral. Show them what we can do. But Grace, try to limit casualties if you can. We want to send a message, not start a massacre." Grace understood. This battle would define everything that came after. If humanity appeared weak, more attacks would follow. If they appeared brutal, they would become monsters in the eyes of the galaxy. They had to be precise, dangerous, but controlled. She gave the order. The Black Armada moved. Fleet Master Korath was reviewing tribute demands in his quarters when his sensor officer contacted him with confusion in her voice. "Fleet Master, we're detecting incoming vessels. They just appeared from FTL travel." Korath waved a limb dismissively. "Human patrol ships, no doubt, coming to negotiate their surrender." "How many?" There was a long pause. 47, Fleet Master." Korath went still. That was impossible. Human records showed they had perhaps 20 combat-capable vessels in their entire fleet. Where had 47 warships come from? He hurried to the command deck and stared at the sensor display. The ships emerging from faster-than-light travel were unlike anything in Concord databases. Their hulls were black, so dark they seemed to absorb light itself. No running lights, no identification signals. They moved in perfect formation, spreading out to surround the Vethrani flotilla with mechanical precision. "What are those?" Korath demanded. No one had an answer. Commander Nathan Cole led the vanguard from his ship, the Phantom. He was calm despite the tension around him. He had trained for this moment for 15 years, running countless simulations against enemy forces with superior technology. The key was never to fight fair. Fair fights against stronger opponents meant death. "All ships, weapons free on my command," he said into the fleet channel. "Remember your training. They're bigger and stronger, but they're slow and predictable. Use that." Admiral Holloway's voice came through from the Erebus. "Commander Cole, you have tactical command. Make it count." "Commander Cole." Nathan smiled slightly. "Yes, ma'am." The battle began. Korath expected the humans to charge directly at his formation, the way primitive species always did. Instead, the black ships scattered, using the colony's moon for cover, darting through asteroid fields, appearing and disappearing on sensors like ghosts. Then they started shooting. The weapons were nothing Korath recognized. His ships had shields that could withstand conventional weapons for hours. The human weapons ignored those shields entirely. Gravity lances tore through hulls from the inside out, crumpling metal like paper. Null field generators disabled power systems without warning, leaving ships dark and helpless. 3 Vethrani vessels died in the first 2 minutes, destroyed before they could return fire. Korath screamed orders at his captains. "Form up, concentrate fire, destroy the enemy flagship." But the humans would not cooperate. They refused to stay still, refused to engage in the kind of direct confrontation Concord tactics were built for. They hit and ran, struck from unexpected angles, coordinated their attacks with a precision that seemed almost inhuman. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, 9 Vethrani ships were debris. 3 had surrendered, their crews too shocked to continue fighting. Only the Eternal Dominion remained combat-capable, and even it had taken heavy damage. Nathan Cole opened a channel to the surviving enemy flagship, Fleetmaster Korath. "This is Commander Cole of the Earth vessel Phantom. You are ordered to withdraw immediately. Return to Concord space and deliver this message. Earth will not bow. Do not test us again." Korath stared at the display showing the human ships surrounding him. His entire worldview had shattered in 11 minutes. In 40,000 years, no younger species had ever won a direct engagement against a Concord enforcement action. The idea was unthinkable. It violated everything he understood about the natural order of the galaxy, but the evidence floated all around him. The burning hulls of his ships, the surrender signals from his captains, the black human vessels that had appeared from nowhere and destroyed his command with casual efficiency. He gave the order to retreat. The Eternal Dominion limped away, carrying word of the impossible back to the Citadel of Voices. On New Helsinki, Governor Linda Price watched the alien ships flee. Her aide Kevin stood beside her, tears streaming down his face. Around them, people poured into the streets, cheering and embracing. They had expected death. Instead, they had witnessed a miracle. Admiral Holloway allowed herself a moment of relief aboard the Erebus. They had won. Against all odds, against the most powerful military force in the galaxy, they had won. But she knew this was only the beginning. The Concord would not let this stand. They would return with more ships, more weapons, more determination. The real war had not yet started. She recorded a message and broadcast it on all frequencies, making sure the entire galaxy could hear. "This is Admiral Grace Holloway of the Earth Defense Force. Today, a Concord fleet attempted to subjugate one of our worlds. They failed. We did not seek this conflict, but we will not run from it either. Earth and her colonies will remain free. We do not bow. We do not kneel. Any force that threatens our people will be met with fire." Across the galaxy, the message spread. Junior species that had lived under Concord rule for thousands of years heard it and felt something they had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. The elder races heard it and felt something they had not experienced in millennia. Fear. The galaxy would never be the same. News of the Battle of New Helsinki traveled faster than anyone expected. Within days, every inhabited world in the galaxy knew what had happened. A younger species had defeated a Concord enforcement fleet. Not through trickery or luck, but in direct combat. The impossible had become real. On Earth, the reaction was complicated. Some people celebrated in the streets, proud of what their species had accomplished. Others locked themselves in their homes, terrified of what would come next. Everyone understood that the Concord would not simply accept defeat. Retaliation was coming. The only questions were when and how bad it would be. Admiral Grace Holloway spent her days preparing for that retaliation. She pushed her crews harder, ran more drills, reviewed every piece of intelligence the Black Armada had gathered. Commander Nathan Cole worked beside her, coordinating the fleet's defensive positions around Earth's colony worlds. Then something unexpected happened. Ambassador Diane Marsh received a secret communication through channels no one knew existed. The sender identified herself as Keshra, a representative of the Torvani species. The Torvani were reptilian creatures who had joined the Concord 3,000 years ago. They had been integrated, in the same way humanity was being asked to integrate. Forced to bow and serve the elder races. Keshra wanted to meet. In secret. Away from Concord eyes. Grace was suspicious when Diane told her about the request. It could be a trap. The Concord might be using the Torvani to lure us into an ambush. Diane nodded slowly. It could be. Or it could be exactly what it looks like. A chance to find allies. After much debate, they decided to take the risk. A small delegation traveled to a dead moon in unclaimed space, far from any inhabited system. What they found there changed everything. The Torvani were not alone. Representatives from 6 other species waited on that moon. All of them were junior members of the Concord, species that had been absorbed centuries or millennia ago. They looked different from each other, some humanoid, some completely alien. But they all wore the same expression on their faces. Desperate hope. Keshra spoke for the group. She was tall for a Torvani, with green scales and golden eyes that seemed ancient despite her relatively young age. She had been preparing for this moment her entire life. For 3,000 years, my people have served the Concord, she said. We mine their resources. We fight their wars. We watch our children taken to serve in their fleets. We have no voice, no freedom, no future except what they allow us. She paused, looking at the human delegates with something like wonder. And then, you came. You said no. You fought back. You won. She gestured at the other representatives around her. We are not the only ones who saw what you did. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the Battle of New Helsinki and felt something they had forgotten how to feel. You showed them that the Concord can be beaten. Grace studied the assembled aliens carefully. What exactly are you proposing? Keshra straightened her spine. An alliance. The elder races have ruled through fear for 40,000 years. They have superior technology. Yes. But their militaries have grown soft. They have not fought a real war in 10,000 years. They have forgotten what it means to face an enemy who refuses to surrender. A smaller creature, something that looked like a fur-covered primate, spoke up. His name was Horath, and he represented a species called the Kellish. We cannot fight openly. Not yet. Our people are scattered across Concord space, watched constantly. But we can help in other ways. Intelligence, sabotage, supply disruptions. When the time comes, we can strike from within. Diane exchanged glances with Grace. This was bigger than either of them had imagined. They were not just talking about defending Earth anymore. They were talking about starting a revolution. If we do this, Grace said slowly, there is no going back. The Concord will hunt all of us. They will try to destroy everyone involved. Keshra nodded. We know. But we would rather die fighting than live forever on our knees. The alliance was formed that day. They called themselves the Free Worlds Compact. 7 species, united by a common dream of freedom. Humanity would provide the military backbone. The junior species would provide intelligence, supplies, and eventually, when the moment was right, uprising. Meanwhile, the Concord was not idle. At the Citadel of Voices, the elder races debated how to respond to humanity's defiance. Some wanted immediate and overwhelming retaliation. Others counseled caution, arguing that a prolonged war could destabilize the entire galactic order. High Arbiter Zelthus pushed hardest for war. He stood before the assembled representatives and spoke with barely controlled fury. These humans have humiliated us. They have shown the galaxy that the Concord can be challenged. If we do not crush them completely, others will follow their example. Every junior species will start thinking about rebellion. Our entire system of governance will collapse. The elder races argued for days, but in the end, Zelthus got what he wanted. The Concord assembled a grand fleet unlike anything seen in 10,000 years. 300 warships from 6 elder races, carrying the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. They would be commanded by Admiral Sithrak of the Morthani, a legendary warrior who had never lost a battle in his 300 years of service. Sithrak was not like Korath. He did not underestimate his enemies. He studied everything the Concord knew about humanity, their tactics, their weapons, their psychology. He developed plans, and backup plans, and backup plans, for the backup plans. These humans are clever, he told his captains. They fight differently than any species we have faced before. Do not expect them to behave predictably. Do not expect them to surrender when logic says they should. They would rather die than submit. He paused, his ancient eyes hard as stone. So we will give them death. We will burn their colonies. We will shatter their fleet. We will make an example so terrible that no species will dare challenge the Concord for another 40,000 years. The Grand Fleet began its journey toward human space. On Earth, intelligence reports started coming in through the Free Worlds Compact. The junior species were delivering on their promises, feeding humanity information about fleet movements, supply routes, defensive weaknesses. Grace studied the reports with growing concern. 300 ships, she said to Nathan during a late-night strategy session, against our 47. Even with our technological surprises, those odds are impossible. Nathan looked at the star chart on her desk, showing the positions of Earth's colonies and the projected path of the enemy fleet. Then we need to change the odds. Grace raised an eyebrow. How? We have allies now, real allies, and the Concord doesn't know about them. Nathan traced a path on the chart. The Grand Fleet is going to hit our colonies first, soften us up, try to break our morale before they come for Earth. That's their pattern. But what if their supply lines started having problems? What if their communications were disrupted? What if the junior species started causing trouble at exactly the wrong moment? Grace considered this. It was not enough. It would never be enough against 300 warships. But it might give them a chance. Start coordinating with Keshra and the others, she said finally. And pray that whatever we're planning, it works. Across the galaxy, the Free Worlds Compact prepared for war. Torvani operatives memorized sabotage targets. Kellish agents gathered intelligence. Human ships ran final diagnostics and loaded weapons. The long night was coming. But for the first time, those who faced the darkness were not facing it alone. The Grand Fleet struck without warning. Admiral Sithrak had learned from Fleetmaster Korath's failure. He did not send a small force to intimidate. He did not give humanity time to prepare. He hit 3 major human colony worlds simultaneously, splitting his 300 ships into 3 attack groups of 100 each. New Antwerp, Cascade, Port Hamilton. 3 worlds, home to over 50 million people. The attacks came at dawn, local time, on each planet. Concord warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly above the major cities and began bombardment immediately. Defensive satellites were destroyed in the first 30 seconds. Ground-based weapons lasted perhaps a minute longer. On New Antwerp, Governor Marcus Hall barely had time to reach his command bunker before the building above him disappeared in a ball of fire. He managed to send one message to Earth before the communications arrays were destroyed. We're under attack. Heavy bombardment. God help us. The human defensive forces on all 3 worlds fought desperately. They were outnumbered and outgunned. But they bought time. Every minute they held meant more civilians reaching evacuation shelters. More transport ships launching for deep space. More people surviving. Admiral Grace Holloway received the emergency transmissions aboard the Erebus. Her face went pale as she read the casualty reports flowing in. Millions dead in the first hour. Cities burning. Hospital ships overwhelmed. Refugee convoys under attack. Commander Nathan Cole stood beside her, his jaw tight with controlled fury. Where do we go? Grace stared at the tactical display showing the 3 simultaneous attacks. The Black Armada had 47 ships. The enemy had 300. She could not be everywhere at once. She could not save everyone. We have to choose, she said quietly. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. Defense Secretary Paul Jennings joined the discussion via secure channel. His face looked like he had aged 10 years in the past hour. Cascade has the largest civilian population. If we can hold the evacuation corridors open, we can save over 20 million people. Grace nodded slowly. Nathan, take 12 ships to Cascade. Hold as long as you can. Get those people out. Nathan did not argue. He knew the math as well as she did. 12 ships against 100. He was not being sent to win. He was being sent to buy time with lives. What about New Antwerp and Port Hamilton? He asked. Grace's voice was steady, but her eyes showed the pain she was carrying. We can't help them. Not now. We send whatever evacuation ships we can spare, and pray some of them make it through. Nathan left for the Phantom within the hour. As he walked to the hangar bay, he passed crew members who nodded at him grimly. They all knew what this mission meant. Some of them would not come back. The battle at Cascade was the longest single engagement of the war. Nathan's task force of 12 ships arrived to find over 60 enemy vessels in orbit, methodically destroying the planet's infrastructure. Concorde fighters swarmed between the larger ships, hunting evacuation transports. Nathan did not try to fight the enemy fleet directly. He used every trick he knew. His ships dove into asteroid fields and forced pursuing enemies to follow them into treacherous terrain. They used the planet's moons as cover, appearing to fire and then vanishing before return fire could find them. They deployed decoys and false signals, making the Concorde sensors show phantom ships that did not exist. For 9 hours, Nathan's task force held the evacuation corridor open. Transport after transport escaped into deep space, carrying families who would never see their homes again but who would live to see another day. The cost was terrible. Ship after ship in Nathan's task force was destroyed. The Phoenix, the Shadow, the Silent Hope. Each loss was announced on fleet communications in flat, professional tones that could not hide the grief beneath. Nathan took a direct hit on the Phantom during Hour 7. A Concorde energy beam sliced through his bridge, killing half his command staff instantly. Nathan himself was thrown across the deck, his left arm shattered, and his face burned. Medical teams dragged him to the infirmary, but he refused treatment until the battle was over. "I'm not leaving my crew," he said through gritted teeth. "Get me a console. Any console." By the time the Concorde fleet finally secured orbit over Cascade, only 4 human ships remained operational, but over 200,000 civilians had escaped, and 18 enemy vessels were debris. Proof that even in defeat, humanity made its enemies pay. Nathan's damaged task force limped back toward Earth. The other 3 ships escorted the Phantom, keeping watch as medical teams worked frantically to keep their commander alive. Meanwhile, the Free Worlds Compact activated. Across Concorde space, junior species began their coordinated uprising. Torvani saboteurs destroyed fuel depots and supply convoys. Kellish hackers disrupted military communications. On a dozen worlds, populations that had been quiet for centuries suddenly became very loud. The elder races were forced to divert ships from the human campaign to deal with these new threats. Admiral Sithrak's Grand Fleet, which had started at 300 ships, found itself stretched thin as vessels were recalled to handle emergencies elsewhere. But it was not enough. Even with losses and diversions, Sithrak still commanded over 200 warships. He continued his advance toward Earth, destroying 2 more colony worlds along the way. His message was clear: surrender or watch everything burn. On Earth, Paul Jennings called an emergency meeting of the military council. His classified display showed something that made several generals gasp. 30 years ago, when we started Project Obsidian, we knew the Black Armada might not be enough, Paul said. So we built a reserve. A second fleet, hidden even deeper than the first. 83 additional warships, crewed by volunteers who knew they might spend their entire careers waiting for a day that might never come. He activated the display. The second fleet emerged from the darkness, ship after ship appearing on the screen. "This is everything we have. 112 warships total. When we combine the survivors of the Black Armada with the reserves, against Sithrak's 200 plus. Grace studied the numbers. The odds were still terrible, but they were better than before. "It's not enough for a straight fight," she said. "We need something else. A different approach." Nathan's voice came over the channel. He was conscious again, his arm in a regeneration cast, and his face covered in healing patches. He looked terrible, but his mind was still sharp. "Admiral, I've been thinking. Sithrak is coming straight for Earth because that's what he expects to hurt us most. He thinks destroying our homeworld will break our morale. But what if we weren't here when he arrived?" Grace frowned. "Explain." "The Concorde's strength is their infrastructure. Their shipyards, their supply depots, their communication networks. What if we stopped defending and started attacking? What if we took the fight to them while their Grand Fleet was busy looking for us at Earth?" The council fell silent, considering the implications. It was a massive gamble. If it failed, Earth would be defenseless when Sithrak arrived. But if it worked, it would change everything. Grace looked at the faces around the table. She saw fear there, but she also saw determination. These people had already lost friends, family, entire worlds. They had nothing left to lose, except everything. Begin planning, she said. We're not going to wait for them to come to us. We're going to show them what happens when you corner humanity. In the darkness of space, the combined human fleet began to move. Not toward Earth, but away from it. Toward the heart of Concord space. The long night was far from over. But humanity was done hiding. Admiral Sithrak brought his grand fleet to Earth's solar system, expecting to end the war. 217 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel, the largest concentration of military force the Concord had deployed in 10,000 years. They formed up in perfect formation, an armada of destruction ready to burn humanity's homeworld to ash. What they found was silence. Earth's orbital defenses were minimal, a handful of automated platforms, some outdated patrol ships. The Black Armada was nowhere to be seen. The planet itself seemed almost peaceful, blue and green against the darkness of space. Sithrak stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Vengeance, and felt the first stirring of unease. This was wrong. Humans did not abandon their worlds. They did not flee without fighting. Something was happening that he did not understand. His sensor officer reported contacts emerging throughout the system. Small ships, unarmed transports, civilian vessels, refugees, perhaps, evacuees fleeing before the invasion. But there were so few of them. Where was the human fleet? Where were the black ships that had destroyed Fleet Master Korath? Sithrak ordered his scouts to sweep the system. They found nothing. He tried to contact Concord headquarters for intelligence updates, but the communications were disrupted. Static and interference where there should have been clear channels. The first warning came from a supply convoy 3 systems away. Concord vessels under attack. Human ships appearing from nowhere, destroying fuel depots and ammunition stores, then vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. Then another report, and another. All across Concord space, human warships were striking targets. Not military fleets, but infrastructure, communication relays, repair facilities, the network of support that kept the Grand Fleet operational. Sithrak realized the truth with growing horror. The humans had not fled Earth. They had left it as bait. While he brought his entire fleet to destroy their homeworld, they had sent their ships deep into Concord territory to destroy everything he needed to maintain his campaign. He was cut off. No reinforcements. No resupply. No way to coordinate with headquarters. His grand fleet, the most powerful force in the galaxy, was suddenly alone and isolated. And the uprisings were getting worse. The Free Worlds Compact had waited for this moment. Across Concord space, junior species rose against their masters. Torvani battle groups that had been waiting in hidden positions struck at elder race shipping lanes. Kellish populations on dozens of worlds refused to work, grinding industrial production to a halt. The Concord was burning, and Sithrak was standing at the wrong end of the galaxy with no way to help. Admiral Grace Holloway brought the combined human fleet home. 112 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel around Earth. They looked different than they had at the start of the war. Battle damage marked their hulls. Crews were exhausted, running on stimulants and determination. But they were still fighting. Nathan Cole commanded the vanguard from a borrowed ship, the Defiance. His injuries had healed enough for him to stand on a bridge again. Though his left arm still ached in cold weather, he studied the tactical display showing the Concord fleet and felt something he had not expected. Confidence. The enemy fleet was larger, but they were confused, their communications disrupted, their supply lines cut, and the human ships had spent weeks fighting deep in enemy territory, perfecting tactics against superior forces. Grace opened a channel to the fleet. Her voice was calm and steady. The voice of someone who had accepted whatever came next. All ships, this is Admiral Holloway. 4 months ago, the Concord demanded that we bow. They told us that younger species must learn their place. They sent fleets to burn our worlds and kill our people. She paused, letting the words sink in. Today, we give them our answer. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity does when backed into a corner. We do not surrender. We do not negotiate. We fight, and we win. The battle for Earth began at dawn, local time, over the Pacific Ocean. Human ships struck from multiple directions, using the Moon and Earth's orbital stations as cover. Concord vessels tried to form defensive positions, but their coordination was fractured. Without proper communications, each captain fought alone, making decisions without knowing what their allies were doing. Nathan led his squadron directly at the enemy center. It was suicide by any logical measure. But logic had nothing to do with it. He needed to draw fire away from the civilian evacuation ships, still launching from Earth's surface. All units, follow my lead, he said into the tactical channel. We're going straight through them. His ships accelerated to maximum speed, firing as they went. Gravity lances tore into conquered vessels. Null field generators disabled enemy systems. Human fighters swarmed around larger ships, targeting engines and weapons. The Concorde returned fire with everything they had. Human ships died by the dozen. The Resolute, the Morning Star, the Hope of Cascade. Each name was a crew of people who would never go home. But for every human ship destroyed, 2 Concorde vessels burned. The battle raged for 3 days. Neither side rested. Neither side surrendered. Ships fought until their weapons failed, then rammed enemy vessels in final acts of defiance. On the second day, the Free Worlds Compact arrived. Keshra's Torvani battle group emerged from faster-than-light travel directly behind Sithrak's fleet. 12 ships, not enough to change the outcome alone, but enough to matter. Keshra opened a channel on all frequencies. This is the Torvani Free Fleet. We stand with humanity. The age of the Concorde is ending. Other Allied ships arrived throughout the battle. Kellish frigates, Mundari destroyers, species that had been silent for millennia, finally fighting back. Sithrak watched his fleet crumble around him and understood that he had already lost. Not just this battle, but everything. The Concorde's control of the galaxy was built on fear, and humanity had shown the galaxy that fear could be overcome. Grace offered surrender terms. Withdraw from human space. Release all enslaved junior species. Accept the formation of a new galactic government where all species had equal voice. Sithrak refused. He was old, and he had served the Concorde his entire life. He would not live to see its end. Fire all weapons, he ordered. Destroy the human flagship. The Eternal Vengeance turned toward the Erebus, its weapons charging for a final devastating strike. Nathan saw what was happening. Without thinking, he pushed the Defiance into the path of the incoming fire. His ship took the blast meant for Grace's vessel. The Defiance broke apart. Emergency pods launched in all directions as the ship died around its crew. Nathan's pod was recovered 3 hours later, drifting in the debris field. He was unconscious but alive. Sithrak's flagship did not survive much longer. Surrounded by human and allied ships, the Eternal Vengeance was torn apart by concentrated fire. Sithrak died on his command deck, still giving orders that no one was left to follow. When the battle ended, 119 Concorde vessels limped away from Earth's system. The rest were debris floating in orbit around humanity's homeworld. The war did not end at Earth. It took 4 more years of fighting before the Concorde finally agreed to negotiate. The elder races had ruled for 40,000 years, and they did not give up easily. But the outcome was never really in doubt after that day. The myth of Concorde invincibility was shattered. Junior species across the galaxy rose up, demanding freedom and equal rights. The old order crumbled, not all at once, but steadily and inevitably. Grace Holloway retired from active service when the fighting ended. Her health was broken by years of stress and combat. She lived quietly on Earth, watching the news as the new Galactic Assembly took shape. Nathan Cole recovered from his injuries and became the first human to command a joint Free Worlds fleet. He spent the rest of his career keeping the peace in the chaotic aftermath of the war, making sure the sacrifices of those who died had meaning. Diane Marsh became humanity's first ambassador to the Galactic Assembly. She sat in a chamber much like the Citadel of Voices. But this time, Earth's seat was no lower than any other. Keshra received a hero's welcome when she returned to her homeworld. The Torvani, free for the first time in 3,000 years, began rebuilding their culture and their pride. Years later, a human journalist tracked down High Arbiter Zelthus. He was living in exile, stripped of rank and power, forgotten by the galaxy he had once helped rule. She asked him what lesson the elder races had learned from humanity. Zelthus was quiet for a long moment before answering. His compound eyes, once so arrogant, now seemed tired and old. "We thought we understood war," he said finally. "We had forgotten it. You reminded us that fire does not bow, it only burns." The journalist recorded his words. They were taught in schools across human space for generations afterward. Humanity had been asked to kneel. They had been threatened and attacked and nearly destroyed. But they had not bowed. They had answered with fire, and the galaxy would never forget it.